listening to the Straight to Video podcast with Rob Lane.
Hey, what is going on? Hope you're well, and thank you for checking out my Straight to Video podcast. As always, I'm your host, Rob Lane, and whenever I get the chance to spotlight a new artist or creative person on the show, it's always a thrill for me, and today is no different. So I'm pretty easy to please, or on the surface it might seem that way. Give me some great hooky pop tunes with some 80s sheen on them and I am all in. But those who know me know I'm pretty cynical and, well, a little jaded these days, so for it to crack the surface then, I'm a little tough to dive all in. There's a lot, and I mean a lot of people out there doing either synthwave, retrowave, well, just heavily 80s influenced music, and it all sounds great, but few manage to break through with killer songs like the caliber of, say, The Midnight, for example. Today's guest, Reeve Stimpson, though, has the hooks and the choruses, and I'm stoked to have him here on the podcast today. We chat about his brand new music video, Over Me, which is a sun-soaked tribute to videos not seen since the heyday of Huey Lewis and the News, and it's long overdue. We talk 80s movies and collecting VHS tapes, as well as Reeve's DIY approach to building a fan base, which I urge you all to take part in. You'll have to listen to the chat to hear what I'm talking about. This Straight to Video podcast is proudly presented to you in association with Affinity Photo, an incredible piece of photo editing software which I've been using for graphic design the past couple of years. Affinity Photo is used to create the podcast episode artwork you see each week, and it's an extremely affordable alternative to other programs on the market. So please check them out at affinity.serif.com. Alright, let's do this. Please make sure to check out the brand new video for Over Me, and also the behind the scenes look into how it was made over on Reeve's YouTube channel. And for everything else, visit reevestimpson.com. But right now, please enjoy my straight to video chat with Reeve Stimpson. We messed up because we missed Back to the Future Day, which was yesterday.
You know, honestly, I thought it was the 26th for some reason. I think Facebook or AI has made it. Every time I see that post, it's the day that Marty went back or the day that Marty goes. It's like a different day every time I see a post.
Yeah, I think it was yesterday was October the 21st was the day they traveled to the future in part 2. Shit.
You're kidding me. I missed that whole promotion for my song. Thank you for letting me know I missed.
I saw online someone's taken the song and put scenes from Back to the Future 2 over your music, which I thought was pretty neat.
Yeah, that whole page does a really good job promoting. The guy who runs that, his name's Christian, and I reach out every time I have a new song that kind of would fit in the same genre of like that kind of retro pop. And every time he's done that for Over Me, my recent song, One Night Stand, and Back to the Future. So huge help from him.
I think they like open up doors for all these new songs.
It does, because I would be putting out a music video for it, which is the version I'm seeing of it, and then someone else is throwing in what they kind of envision when they hear it. So it's cool to see like, oh, this is what they're getting out of that song. That's great.
Quick quiz, which is your favorite Back to the Future episode?
My favorite's definitely the first one, because the whole concept was just, I don't know if the concept had been done before. I know it's been done 1,000 times since, but the first one is just perfect in every way to me. It's like there are so many 80s movies I go back and watch now that I'm like, I don't know if that was as good as I remember it being, but the first one still holds up so much.
I always think part 2's got the perfect ending though, where Doc gets blasted back, then the guy arrives with a letter. It's ultimate cliffhanger, the ultimate cliffhanger.
Very true. I definitely was not really, I can't say I was ever a fan of the third one. Like it was good, but the whole like getting that far away from the storyline and getting into the Wild Wild West things was all right. But first two were definitely the best.
Absolutely, man. All the singles which you've got out at the moment are absolutely fantastic. In today's world, there's no like hard and fast rule on how to release music. What are your plans? Are you just dropping singles with an album planned for later on?
Yeah, I've got an album that I'm planning to have completed by the spring. Going to coincide with some of the tour that I'm working on right now. So I've got a song that I'm releasing in November. It's kind of an 80s power ballad love song. But after that, I'm going to wait until January. And then from January on, I'm going to work to get a song out every 5 to 6 weeks throughout the entire year. So once it hits 8 songs, then I'm going to pile everything together, into an album so I can push that out to vinyl. I'm going to do some cassette tape releases for that, but just keep releasing a single after that album is out as well. Just keep things rolling.
How are you finding like the response to songs? Because the direction you're moving in, like we mentioned earlier with the synthwave channels taking your songs, I mean, it's opened you up to this whole retro wave, synthwave community, which might seem a world away from Nashville's country sound where you currently live. But are those scenes more similar than people realize when it comes to songwriting? Drop it down on an acoustic guitar and it's all the same.
Definitely. I think a lot of the problem that I have with synthwave and retrowave is it almost feels like the same song to me on repeat. A lot of songs kind of feel the same. The Midnight is a great band that does synthwave, but I feel like everybody else is just trying to kind of copy that. And there are some specific artists that I like that branch out into what I feel was more of an 80s sound. Like people forget that the 80s wasn't just, I don't know, Duran Duran and Wham. Like Bruce Springsteen existed in the 80s and John Mellencamp was an 80s artist. Like these guys that would be considered country nowadays were big 80s artists at the time, like considered pop and pop rock. So the thing about country that is so similar to 80s music in general is that the people who made 90s country grew up on 60s and 70s music. The people who are making country music now are people who grew up on 80s pop and rock.
100%. Yeah.
You're doing Jason Aldean songs that if you took out the country aspect of the vocals and you took out maybe like a steel guitar, it would sound like it's a Van Halen song or like a Def Leppard thing. So I think the genres are a lot closer than people want to admit. Even stuff like Don Henley. Like Don Henley was a huge solo 80s artist, but obviously coming from the Eagles, which was a country rock band, Don Henley still came in as a Texas artist and brought in 80s pop. He has even some of the Southern country kind of part in his vocals. It just work with the genre.
Is the Nashville scene pretty overwhelming being out there with everyone moving there as the main music hub, or do you just have to find your own place and network within it all?
I don't think it's really overwhelming. I think that just as many people move here that also kind of discovered that maybe what they wanted to move here for isn't what they want to stick around for. A lot of people move here with kind of an idea of what Nashville is, and maybe they spend a few years here and they kind of discover that it's probably going to take a lot longer. And I don't think that being in Nashville is necessary to staying in music, but it's great if you want to be surrounded by people who continue to want to keep your chops up. I love being around so many other musicians. I would move probably closer back to my home in Virginia, where I was from, if not for the fact that I'm just surrounded by so many people who are trying to do the same thing. I guess I would just fall into the trap of, settling into kind of like a get married, have the kids, do all the things if I move back home. But right now I'm in the place where I can really focus on the career that I'm building.
You've been out there since 2016, I think. When did you finally feel comfortable?
I went to Belmont the fall of the year that I moved here. I got a degree in songwriting and music business. I think I kind of really started to feel more comfortable probably like my sophomore year. As soon as I got here, I had the get to the ground mentality of it. I'm going to go to every bar that there is here in Nashville. I'm going to hand them a CD. I'm going to be like, you guys need to hear this. You guys need to book me. And there's something really great about being a little naive because, a lot of times I've had doors open for me that wouldn't have been open if I hadn't been so naive.
Is it naive or fearless?
That's a good question. You know what? Probably naive. If I thought that I was too good for it, then it'd be naive. I think fearless would be a better way to phrase it. Thank you.
Like, keep taking the shots. Someone's going to say yes at some point.
Exactly. And honestly, the ones that said no were a better one than the ones that said yes, because I probably would still be doing what I moved to Nashville for, which is to become more of a country artist and to write a lot more country. And because of so many people saying no to certain things, I've kind of found my avenue and being like, you know what? If I'm going to have this many people say no to something that I'm not even 100% sold on myself, I might as well go all in on a sound that I've always loved, that I can, no matter what, if people aren't going to listen to it, at least I'm going to love the music I'm putting out. That's really important to me.
You mentioned you're from Virginia originally. How do you pronounce the town you're from? Is it Powhatan?
You pronounce it like everybody else does. That's so great. It's called Powhatan.
Powhatan, right? Oh, cool.
Yeah.
That sounds a lot better.
Yeah. It's named after Chief Powhatan, which was Pocahontas' dad.
Oh, cool, man. What is that? Is that like, I had a quick look on the map. Is that like 9 hours east of Nashville kind of thing?
Yeah, between 9 and 10 hours. I'll be driving in for Thanksgiving, so we'll see. It's probably 10 hours, yeah.
How does the music scene compare compare there to like the full on where you are now? Is it a different world?
It's definitely different. Here you can go to, I feel like you could go to a dollar store and the cashier in Nashville is a really good guitarist. This like trying to like find a way to make a living in the music industry. But Richmond is the closest city to where I'm from. And they've got a really good music scene. It's very kind of like underground rock scene, kind of like in most major cities, like indie bands and stuff. But here it's more concentrated. So there's just so much talent in such a small space that it's almost impossible to not run into someone who does music or works in the music industry.
So was Richmond like the main touring hub for national acts back home for you, or where was the main place for bands to come through?
Yeah, definitely. Richmond is probably the area you'd go to, either that or Charlottesville. Those are the two of those have like the biggest venues, the John Paul Jones Arena in Charlottesville, and Richmond's got the Coliseum and a bunch of small kind of like club scene bars as well.
What were some of the first shows you saw growing up?
First shows I saw, it's so funny. I think the first actual concert I went to was the Jonas Brothers.
Nice.
Which I don't know why it sounds like I'm giving them crap. They're a fantastic band.
I bet that was a rock show though as well, right?
Yes. Well, when I went, I was probably 13 and I was way more interested in all the 13-year-old girls that were all along with me. I was like, oh, this is perfect.
Yeah, you were clued up, dude. Like, this is awesome.
Yeah, and I was with like my two younger sisters too. So I think my younger brother might have gone, but my sisters and I went with my parents, and I was like, I couldn't care less what they're singing about. There are so many girls here. Like, I want to do this for a living.
Their big song, Year 3000, that was written by the band Busted, who are huge over here.
That's right. Yeah. That's one of those things I keep forgetting every time. I'm like, oh, that's right. They didn't write that song.
Your songwriting is quite similar to the guy James Bourne from Busted. He's a fantastic songwriter, and I keep meaning to send him a tweet with your Back to the Future song, because he's like a huge Back to the Future fan. I'm like,
oh, nice.
He needs to hear this song. I think he'd really dig it.
I'll have to look into his stuff and see like what he's done songwriter-wise outside of the band too.
Oh man, yeah, James Bourne, his name is. So yeah, he's fantastic. Busted are like a much underrated band over here. They disappeared for a few years, then did a comeback album, and it was very synth-based. Check out the album Night Driver, which was kind of like their comeback album. There's some awesome stuff on that.
Definitely. I'd love to check that out. Night Driver. Okay, cool.
So after the Jonas Brothers, what was the next step from there?
I saw a lot of country concerts when I was growing up. One of my biggest influences was Eric Church. I saw him a couple times. I think the concert that definitely was one where I went, and when I was leaving, I was like, this is what I want to do forever, was Jason Aldean. That was probably my sophomore year in high school. But the good thing was, I think after that, my dad, we'll probably get into this for sure, but my dad's parents had a record store at one point. So he had a ton of cassettes for me when I was growing up. And it was bands like Foreigner in Boston, Def Leppard, also some like the 80s pop bands as well. But he got me into those bands, and I was lucky enough. I got to see the concert that was probably the best show I've ever seen was the Eagles right before Glenn Frey passed away. So I got to see them. That and probably Tom Petty right before he passed away were like the two biggest ones for me.
I was going to ask if you saw Tom Petty live, because I know you're a big fan. I wondered if you'd seen him before he passed away.
I was so lucky to get to see him before he passed away. My dad and I have a joke now. We're like, we just need to stop seeing big artists because apparently like they die after we see them. So we're just going to quit.
Where did you see Tom Petty at?
I saw him in Nashville.
Nice.
In Joe Walsh up enough for him.
Wow.
Really good, yeah.
Who's on your list of still to see, though? Who would you really like to see?
I want to see bands in their heyday, which is tough. And I can't see the bands that I love growing up in their heyday. So I kind of just have to watch like old concerts online. But I would say that the band that I need to still see, and this is perfect, this is UK based, Oasis.
Good timing.
I know. And it's one of those things too where I was like, it's never going to happen. And I know that everybody had the same opinion. But for so many years, I was like, I had this conspiracy theory built up. I was like, I know that these guys are just talking to each other. We're going to wait until the perfect moment. We're going to bring it back. But I love Noel and I love Liam both separately in their solo projects. But if I could go to see them at some point, if they have I'm sure they're going to do a US leg at some point. But if they make it past the UK dates, I guess they don't, kill each other. But that's definitely a band I still need to see live.
How was you introduced to them? Were they big when you were growing up?
They're kind of one of those bands where I only knew them as Wonderwall growing up, but I dated a girl who got me into Oasis, like really deep in all their deep cuts and all this stuff, and got me into Noel's songwriting. I think Liam's got a great voice, but Noel, I think, is just a killer artist in general. But yeah, I had an ex that definitely got me into Oasis hardcore.
You mentioned your grandparents had a record store back in Virginia. Was it the Farmville Record Shop?
It was. Did I mention that, or did you happen to find that?
I'll tell you where I found it. You do that intro video and you flash up a newspaper article.
That's right. Okay, yeah.
It's on there. That's where I got it.
That's great.
How long did they have it for? Do you know?
That's a good question. I think they definitely had it for a few years. I want to say either the late 70s or early 80s, but it was partnered with it was half of a Radio Shack and then the other half was a record store. My dad is funny. He always tells me, he's like, I wasn't like the most popular guy in high school, but when I showed up to parties with the tapes, it's like, oh, Stimpson's got the music.
Like bringing the keg of beer into an underage party or something like that.
Exactly.
Either bring the keg of beer or the music.
Yeah, he wasn't as bad as the Matthew McConaughey character in Dazed and Confused, but he definitely bringing in the music for sure. And they had that for a few years. So I didn't grow up so much with vinyl. I know a lot of people my age are like, yeah, we grew up with vinyl. I'm like, no, you didn't.
No, you didn't know.
No, you want to say you grew up with vinyl because it's cool, but you might have grown up with cassettes, but it was cassettes and CDs growing up for sure. But my parents had a ton of cassettes. I've got my dad's old radio and cassette player and amplifier and stuff. So we're trying to hook all that up.
I don't think we had it in the UK, but I know from going to record stores in the US, they'd had the cassettes and the CDs on those big long plastic things.
Oh, yeah.
Remember those?
Definitely.
They'd had that. We never had those over here. That was such a weird thing. Was that so people couldn't steal them?
Oh, that's weird. Yeah, I never even considered that. You guys did not have them at all?
No. We never had CD long boxes either.
Oh, wow. Man, that's wild.
Those look really cool as well. I keep searching for some, cause I'm into all the hair metal stuff, and I keep trying to find some hair metal long box things, because the artwork looked really cool when they did it on the card boxes.
You'll have to let me know if there's any ones in particular. There's a store here in Nashville called McKay's, and they've got a ton of them. It's a warehouse filled up with CDs, cassette tapes. Unfortunately, no VHS tapes. I'm building up like a VHS collection right now, but they don't have any of those. But they've got DVDs, CDs, the long box tapes, everything. So if there's anything you're looking for, let me know.
Oh, sweet, man. Thank you. Whereabouts is that? Because I was in Nashville a couple of years ago. I came over for the Rock and Pod event. If I'd have known about this store that had the CDs that time, I'd have called in, but I did not know about it.
It's a little further out of the city. It's probably like 20 minutes out of the city, but it's called McKay's. Unfortunately, I live too close to it to be there all the time. Always on the lookout for new stuff.
Did your dad ever describe what the record store was like, which your grandparents owned?
I think he has mentioned it in the past. I'll have to get some more information for it too, because I've had a couple people ask about that, and I really want to get more details to tell people, because the only information that I know is that it did exist and that they did sell the records. Outside of that, unfortunately, is a little too before my time.
Everyone wants to know if they had like a t-shirt section or the button badges and all that kind of stuff, or the patches for the back of the jean jackets or something like that.
I don't think it was as close to that of a record shop as more of it was just like deemed the Farmville record shop and also had other things there.
So not like John Cusack High Fidelity Records.
Exactly. No, nothing like that.
Did you have a kind of a counterpoint to that growing up, or a similar place, or was digital becoming really big while you were seriously getting into music?
Digital is definitely probably when I got my first iPod for Christmas, when iTunes was coming up, like originally iTunes and all that stuff. But that was probably maybe when I was in junior high. So before then, it was definitely CDs for the longest time. And I think I discovered most of my music from my parents, but also just from YouTube, because YouTube was so great. I didn't grow up in the 80s, but I had the access to all the music videos. Like my favorite ones, I remember watching like Take Me Home Tonight was like one of the first videos I was obsessed with. Those, the Huey Lewis videos, Michael Jackson, obviously. But that's probably the best way I found out about more music and more artists was YouTube.
That must have been quite overwhelming. I can't imagine what that must have been like, because it makes me sound like really old. But like when we had MTV, we'd have to wait for like an hour for the videos to circulate around again, your favorite ones, which taught us patience.
We could use more of that right now.
But you just had it, once you dived into like the 80s stuff, you just had everything. It must have been like overload.
Definitely. And I'll tell you, it's actually kind of come back to bite me in the ass. And I think most people nowadays might even have a similar opinion, is that we've had so much instant access to all this stuff that I almost like, I'll turn on the TV to watch YouTube just to look for a Christmas movie that has commercials in the film. I like to watch things with commercials. I like going back to regular terrestrial radio just because I don't want to have to be a DJ every time I get in my car. Just please someone else take the control from me. But like you said, starting with YouTube and getting into Spotify and all that, we've had like the instant access to all this stuff. So it's almost not fun anymore. I'm like, I can discover my own music. That's great, but I'm not going to find a lot of new music if all I'm doing is listening to the same stuff I've always listened to. But yeah, I've gone into the whole, I want to find commercials and I want to find the breaks in between things. I don't need to be stimulated all the time.
Probably watch commercials 24 hours a day as well, all the old school 80s
Exactly.
ones.
Yeah. I've gone down a rabbit hole of that too. I just will put on like 80s or 90s commercials in the background to be like, oh yeah, that's right. McDonald's did used to sell really cool toys when I was a kid for no reason at all.
You mentioned the Midnight earlier. They did that on one of their earlier albums. They had like a section before a song where it was all clips from commercials.
I'll have to look into that. I'm in the process of working on a new music video for this new power ballad song. Basically, the premise is a 90s infomercial of you two could own the greatest love songs of your generation. Then get into my song, which will be like watching a Richard Marx music video or something, like me playing on stage and stuff.
Man, Richard Marx is just at the top of his game always.
Yeah, I just found out him and Rick Springfield are on tour right now together. So I need to go see them. They're going to be in Nashville in February. I'm going to try to get tickets to that. But I didn't get into Richard Marx until the last few years as far as like all the deep cuts. Obviously, I grew up knowing Right Here Waiting, but there's a bunch of them. Same with Rick Springfield. Once I discovered their back catalog, I was like, man, these guys like had a bunch of hits I didn't realize.
Yeah, Richard Marx for a while was all I listened to. And he's still going great today. Still sounds fantastic.
Oh yeah, I showed him. I showed my mom a video. I was like, "Yeah, Richard Marx is on tour." She's like, "No way!" And we looked it up, and she was like, "Yeah, he aged pretty well." He definitely has.
So what were some of the other early albums that had a massive effect on you?
Okay, one of the biggest ones is actually Thriller.
Right.
I remember very vividly my grandma, my Nana on my mom's side had like a small cassette player, kind of like one that you could, not a Walkman, but something that was a little bit like longer and had the play buttons at the end of it. And my mom gave me the Thriller album. And I remember listening to that at her house on cassette back and forth so many times. I mean, that's one of the albums where I love Thriller in general and I love the music video, but there were a bunch of songs on that too that were just so good. The one, I think The Girl Is Mine with Paul McCartney was on that as well. Such a great song. You just don't have kind of like those back and forth duets. I don't think I've heard a back and forth duet with two guys on it.
That's a good point.
That was definitely a very big formative album for me.
That's something you got to consider when your album's ready. If you're going to put it out on cassette, you got to figure out not just a starting and ending song. You got to figure out an ending of side A and what's going to kick off side B. Well,
that's a good point.
Yeah, you need the right tape turner, I call it. So when it ends on one side, you want to turn that tape over. I always say Wild in the Streets by Bon Jovi, the last song on Slippery When Wet, makes me want to flip the tape and listen to it all over again.
Yeah, it's funny because the people that are starting to like my music now, a lot of them did grow up in the 80s and listen to a lot of that stuff. So I want to pay as much of a tribute to showing them that like I'm not just a person who just discovered 80s music now. I've been listening to it my whole life. Kind of like with the music video, I didn't want to make a music video that like was super synthwave and like have everybody look like they're wearing, you know, too many neons and pastel colors. I wanted to feel like you're watching a video from the 80s. And so basically the same thing when it comes to music. Like I don't want it to feel so on the nose, but I want to also show the people who've listened to that music for a very long time that, oh, he does know his references. He does know the influences. And that's a great idea. Like having that side A to side B will be a good callback for people.
What was everyone else listening to at the time in your friend circle while you were diving through ancient cassettes?
So a lot of my friends grew up with country too, but a lot of them didn't. And they were going through like a lot of rap and a lot of hip hop. One thing I never got into was like, I could listen to 80s hip hop and I could listen to whatever 80s rap was. My knowledge of rap shamelessly ends at Beastie Boys. Outside of that, it's just music that I never really found. Nothing really stuck with me, but a lot of my friends and stuff were listening to a lot of rap and I'd say a lot of Eminem and stuff like that growing up, but I never got into it. I never, like, if it's nothing I could sing along to, I never really found much of an interest in, but yeah, mostly country and rap for my friends.
How did you go about when you started moving in this direction? You was doing like some country stuff, and I think you did you have a band called Scarlet fairly recently?
Yeah, I was in a band for a hot minute. It was called Scarlet. We were going to do close to what I'm doing now, but more of like a little bit more of a rock turn. We did one song before I called it quits. And it was like a band that when you hear Don't Form a Band with Your Friends, couldn't be more true. But one song we put out was actually a cover of Young Lust by Pink Floyd. And we did like a music video for it as well. But we did that. And then everything else has just been country that I had released in the past.
How did you go about taking those original ideas of your songs and capturing like the 80s? Well, it's not really 80s production. It's a very fine line. It's like you can either go back and replicate an 80s sound or you can do it with modern techniques. So did you have something in your head or a particular artist? Because I mean, you did the Killers cover, Somebody Told Me, which kind of starts in that direction. Was that your original starting point a few years ago and like testing the water?
Yes. I had kind of just put out a bunch of testing things on TikTok. I was like, let me try to make some small covers. I did a 1975 cover, and the Killers one kind of took off on TikTok. And I was like, you know what? I'll self-produce this from my home studio. And so I did that all in this room. And then for the rest of the stuff, I work with a producer with. So I send him the demos of all the things that I build up. And then him and I go back and forth on, what can we add here? And then I'll go to Florida where he lives to cut the vocals. But finding somebody like him was great because, like you said, there's a fine line. You can either go back and do almost a direct sound, which is cool, but it's hard to find a new audience for that. Like you can sound like a cover band, unfortunately, if you do that for too long. But I think that's kind of what the problem with Greta Van Fleet was originally. Like I loved their first album. It was fantastic. I preferred them when they sounded too much like Led Zeppelin. Then it was kind of like, okay, well, what else is there? What direction can you go? So finding somebody like my producer, Micah, was great because I can give him the modern influences that I like and also the retro ones. And we can find a really good blend that people who can listen to it are fans of new music and fans of older music as well.
80s films obviously play a huge influence in what you're doing, and no more evident than on the latest single and video, Over Me. You cited the awesome, I love this, you cited the awesome John Hughes movie, Some Kind of Wonderful, as being the influence and theme behind the lyrics. And there's nods to Dirty Dancing in the video, Back to the Future poster if you're really quick to spot it. And everything about the video just spot on, man. You must be super proud of how that turned out, especially as it being like your official first music video.
I'm so proud of it. It's another thing that, if I'm not going to be a fan of it, I don't want to put it out. And I found an artist named Spencer Sutherland, and he does kind of a modern take on retro rock as well, but very vocal heavy, kind of like with a mixture of like Queen and kind of theatrical rock. I saw a video of his and I reached out to the director and the cinematographer and I kind of talking about the idea of everything. And it was a little bit not as hard of a sell, but it was kind of like trying to convince somebody to be like, hey, we can make it seem retro without it seeming like we're trying to make it look too 80s. I don't want it to look like an 80s Halloween costume, but no, I was so proud of that because we got the right guys to do it. I put out a video about how we put the video together on YouTube.
Man, I watched that. That was fantastic.
Thank you.
Really put everything out there, literally down to taking meal breaks.
Yes. I was like, I had the idea from the beginning because I'd never produced a video before, but going into it, I was like, you know what? I'm going to write down anything I can that I can remember. I had a couple calls with the guys afterwards. I was like, is there something I'm missing here? What did we do? But we had about a month and a half before we shot the video to really plan things out. And I came to them originally with a storyboard of all these different music videos kind of spliced together. And we eventually got to a point where it was one cohesive story from starting basically in the video for I'm on Fire by Bruce Springsteen and ending with like a Huey Lewis feel. It was good that we were able to actually keep the whole thing cohesive.
Was there any ideas that didn't make the final cut?
Yes. And going back, I kind of regret that we didn't get this shot, but we just didn't have the time for it. I was originally going to put the whole thing together in one day, and thank God we didn't, because we were like from start to finish. It was like I'm on the phone with someone who's saying, hey, where do I park? While I'm getting my makeup done with the hair and makeup artist. So it was great. But there was one shot that I thought would have been cool is in the second chorus, it goes right down the middle and there's heads on the board that are moving back and forth. Then the first chorus, I thought it would have been cool if we had the two mechanics from the first scene to come in with wrenches and just come out of nowhere and come out from sides and go right down the middle and sing into the wrench, kind of like Uptown Girl a little bit. But we kind of played into just as much as we needed to for cheesiness to where it wasn't like crossing the line.
Turned out great.
Thank you.
Influences from Some Kind of Wonderful. Is that your favorite John Hughes movie? Bit of a deep cut.
It's definitely my favorite John Hughes. I love the staples for sure of John Hughes, but Some Kind of Wonderful, I think, has the best story.
I always know that that's the one he kind of redid Pretty in Pink, which, like you mentioned earlier about watching films again, which you used to watch. I used to love Pretty in Pink. I watched it so many times. Then we watched it a few months ago. I'm like, this ain't as good as I remember it being.
Right.
Then I rewatched Some Kind of Wonderful, and I enjoyed it much more than I did originally.
Really?
Yeah.
The guy in Some Kind of Wonderful, I just related to him so much. I feel like I was him in high school, where I would have done anything to be with the pretty popular girl, not just because she was pretty and popular, because she was also just a fun person. But I definitely felt like that person. I actually, I think my senior year in high school, I dated a girl whose family was pretty well off, and I was trying to impress her as much as I could. So I took a watch and some coins up to a pawn shop, and I was selling it to buy this girl a Christmas present. And it totally reminded me of the part in Some Kind of Wonderful where he takes money out of his bank account, his savings, just to buy a pair of earrings, just to prove a point. But yeah, I totally felt like that was me for sure.
Great soundtrack to that film as well, as there is in every John Hughes film.
Yeah.
The video Over Me, it was shot back in Virginia too. That must make it extra special to have people you knew there.
Definitely. It made it easier too on the cost of the filming as well, because I heard from the director who lives in LA, and he said even if we were to try to just get the shots in the garage, that would have been the total cost of what we did for the entire video, which I mean is crazy because we got the garage and we got the concert area for free just because my parents knew somebody in Virginia Beach who knew another person, and then that's just how it goes. But it was so great to do it there because Virginia Beach still has the coastal boardwalk look of movies like The Lost Boys, and I thought it was perfect because it's kind of like you could try to trick people into thinking that's like Miami. In some places you're like, oh, it's got some palm trees here, it's got like those bars that should have been closed down 20 years ago, all the neon and stuff, and like a carnival at night kind of scene. But yeah, Virginia was such a great place to film there.
Am I right? Is the Kellerman's Hotel in Dirty Dancing, is that actually in Virginia as well?
I'm not sure. I've heard part of Dirty Dancing was filmed either South Carolina, the lake. I think that was filmed elsewhere, but I'll have to look that up.
Yeah, I think it's more inland because your states are, you could probably fit the UK several times in some of your states. So it's probably quite a distance, but I'm sure I read that the Kellerman's Hotel in Dirty Dancing was in Virginia as well, but probably like hours away.
That's cool though. I'll have to look into that. Yeah.
Road trip next time you go home.
That's a great idea to like hit some like 80s movie spots.
You mentioned you started your own VHS collection.
Yes.
Can you share where you're finding them in Nashville? Are there many thrift stores that still have them?
I'm getting a lot of them from eBay, but I would say that Goodwill is actually a really good. Do you guys have Goodwill in the UK?
We have like similar kind of places, yeah.
Okay. So there's a Goodwill up here, and the VHSs are always $1. So I'll go in and try to find some. Most of the time it's like a lot of exercise videos that no one really wants, but I've lucked out. Apparently no one wants St. Elmo's Fire because I found like 4 different copies there. But yeah, I'm slowly but surely building them up. I wanted to start by trying to get as many Tom Cruise 80s movies as possible. So I got Risky Business, Top Gun, Cocktail, get as many Tom Cruise movies as possible, and then kind of branch out from there.
Nice, man. What's on your hit list other than Tom Cruise?
This is actually my favorite one that I've got is one that not a lot of people who've seen 80s movies have heard of as much, but The Flamingo Kid. Kind of set in, I think it was set in the 60s, kind of like Dirty Dancing.
That looks pretty minty condition as well.
Yeah, I actually think this might be one of the original copies because it came like wrapped in plastic as well. So that one, and then Say Anything was another one of my favorite ones I've found as well. Yeah, it's slowly but surely coming together. I got to find more room for it in here.
There's some really good tape collector groups on Facebook and stuff like that, but you can go down like the rabbit holes with all that kind of thing.
I've started to follow a few of them because some of them are really great because they'll be like, there's a max of $5 to sell them. Those are the ones I like to go to the most because I know some people really know the value of these. Harder ones to find, like 80s horror, are extremely like rare to find apparently.
It's just gone through the roof on all that stuff. Used to be able to find them all the time, but now over here it's getting so hard to find stuff. It's insane. See, our videos were a little slightly different. You had them in the card cases. We had them in the big plastic boxes.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
So it's like the clamshell ones.
Yes. Nice.
So Monster Squad's one of my favorites. I don't know if you're a fan or not.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Anything that's kind of like in that fits in that realm, kind of like a Fright Night.
Oh.
I think Lost Boys is a little scarier than those, but Lost Boys, all that stuff is great. That totally reminds me of those cases. I love those. We had 2 video stores when I was growing up, and one of them was where you got all the new movies. And there was another one, which was my favorite one, called Video Square, which they closed down, but it had all the movies, probably just as influential as the music I was listening to were the movies. And they had everything VHS, some DVDs as well, but they had a ton of those like 80s and 70s VHS movies. Probably the only way I was actually watching those at the time. But yeah, that definitely brings me back. That's awesome.
So on the subject of videotapes, I want you to time travel to a Friday night in the late 80s or early 90s and you head into the video store. What movie soundtrack would you have on your Walkman and what 3 tapes would you rent for the weekend?
The movie soundtrack was going to be a toss-up between, I was actually going to say Some Kind of Wonderful at first, and it's got a great soundtrack, but I don't think any 80s soundtrack beats Footloose. And Kenny Loggins has got 2 songs on there. Obviously, he's got the title track, but then he's got I'm Free as well. The one song in there called Never by Moving Pictures, which is where he does that montage of him in the warehouse scene. I was like, oh man, that's the most badass thing I've ever seen. Obviously, I hadn't seen much at the time, but that would be the soundtrack. As far as the movies go, Cocktail would probably be one of them.
Such a strange pitch for a film, Cocktail.
It is, yeah. And I tried to get my girlfriend to watch it, and she was like, that's one of the worst movies I've ever seen. And I was like, come on, give it a shot. And we watched it, and I was like, it's not as good as I remember, but I still get it. That one, I would go with Porky's, just for the fun of it.
Oh, yes.
My dad introduced me to that one. I watched American Pie when I was younger, and he was like, yeah, but you haven't seen Porky's yet. I was like, what Porky's? We didn't watch that together. Probably would have been a little bit awkward when I was younger. But other than those, I have to go back to Say Anything again. It's just, there's so many movies that you could probably like do deep cuts and stuff with, but that's another movie where I felt like the character in that movie. I was introduced to this movie around the same time I was dating a girl who was kind of like the girl in the movie. She was super smart. She was going to a college that was going to be like, I couldn't understand a word of what she was studying, but I totally feel like John Cusack in the scene where he's sitting around the table with the dad, and the dad's like, so what are your plans for the summer? And he's just like, I just plan to spend as much time with your daughter as possible. That's such a realistic thing to like not care anything outside of what happens during that weekend. And I totally relate to the character, just like in Some Kind of Wonderful.
Are you a big Cameron Crowe fan as well then?
Oh God, I love Cameron Crowe. That's one of the people, with the exception of like the TV show that they tried to do, Roadies. Outside of that, Cameron Crowe can like do no wrong in my mind. I'm a huge fan of Almost Famous.
It's in my top 3.
Same, start to finish. It's a great movie, and you can go a deep dive into like all the things that actually made that movie because of how true of a story it was. You know, you can watch it just not knowing how much is based on what he was actually doing when he was younger, and still think it's a great movie, but they just did so well with all the characters.
I think if I ever get jaded about being in a band, I can put Almost Famous on and it brings that spark back.
You have no idea how many times I've been in this room trying to write a song and I put on Almost Famous to be like, you know what? I need to be reminded about why I like this sometimes. It just brings that feeling back of like, man, this is why I want to do it. Because like, I just love music. And he wrote Fast Times. I don't know if he directed Fast Times, probably not, but I know he definitely wrote the story for Fast Times because he went undercover. You know the story for that one, right? Because he like went undercover in high school, but he did Say Anything as well. Jerry Maguire. That's one of the people I'd love to meet in person. I know that they recently came out with like a rescreening of Heartbreaker's Beach Party.
Right. I heard about that. Yeah.
Yeah. It was in theaters for like 2 days and I didn't get a chance to see it. But now that it's past that time, they'll probably re-release it to digital. So I definitely want to watch that. I mean, being Tom Petty and Cameron Crowe, I mean, that can't go wrong.
No brainer, man. One last question. You touched on it a little bit earlier. We're coming up to Halloween. I learned your mom used to make you all handmade Halloween costumes growing up.
She did.
Did you have a particular favorite?
I've got a couple. Yeah, you definitely do some good research. That's great that you knew that. It's not that like my mom was afraid to buy us costumes, but she was always super supportive of like us just wanting to make our own. I will say that when I was younger, I wanted to be Thomas the Tank Engine. And my mom took a cardboard box, put it around me, found me all the stuff she needed to at like thrift stores and Goodwill, and made me a conductor's outfit and made me sit inside the cardboard box and put the wheels on the outside. And I was the conductor inside the train. Between that and like my Tin Man costume from The Wizard of Oz. She's definitely one of the most creative people, if not the most creative people that I know. Super crafty. Like she made the boards for the video in Over Me. I was like, here's some ideas that I've got. Can you help me with these? And she was like, yeah. So she like bought the boards, painted them, and did all this stuff for the beach. But yeah, those Halloween costumes always turned out super well. We definitely won a good amount of Halloween contests just because of those.
Any Halloween plans this year?
Well, so I run a house out here in Nashville. And so last year we had a projector on the front lawn and just watched the Great Pumpkin Charlie Brown. This year we'll probably have some neighborhood friends over and watch Lost Boys in the backyard before we do that. But yeah, Halloween is one of my favorite holidays. I mean, it used to be between that and Christmas, but it's come second to Christmas now. But I've always loved anything kind of scary. As soon as it becomes October 1st to the end of October, I'll be watching a different scary movie every day.
What's on your list of films to see? Do you keep up with the modern horrors?
Sometimes I'll watch some new ones. I have to kind of watch the classics for sure. I'll start off with like Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween, Lost Boys. There's a few that are out now that I'll watch. I've heard the movie The Substance is one I'm going to check out.
I watched that this week.
Was it any good?
It goes batshit crazy at the end.
Really?
If you like body horror stuff, do you remember a film called Society?
No.
With Billy Warlock from Baywatch in it.
I'm going to write that down. Society. Okay.
Batshit crazy. I think it came out like, I'll probably get my years wrong. It's like 88, 89, but it's an amazing snapshot of that time as well. How it looks. It's brilliant. It's really, really cool. One final thing, Reeve. Not only are you doing an incredible job on delivering some amazing 80s tinge songs and videos, but you're also doing some amazing old school promo as well by sending out stickers to people who join your mailing list. I can't tell you how cool it was and old school to receive this all the way from the US.
Nice.
With a postal stamp on there.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen anymore. I was genuinely impressed and grateful for it.
Oh, well, you're very welcome. I'm happy to do it because it's one of those things too where anytime someone goes to the website, reevestimpson.com, there's a free section there. It actually says free at the top and you just just fill out where the mailing list is. It's one way to remind people to see my name. Obviously, they're getting a free sticker. So it's good marketing on my part, but it's also just like I want to genuinely thank people for checking out my music, because there's so much music that you can check out and then never hear from that artist again. So I want to just actually be like, hey, thanks for listening to my music, because it's really tough to get it out there and it's really tough to keep people's attention. So anything I can do to like show my gratitude for people for listening I'll be happy to do it.
It's like you say though, there's so much stuff. I think you popped up on like an Instagram recommendation or something like that. So I was like, oh yeah, this is cool, like the page. But then as good as the music is, it can be so easy to move on to the next thing. So something like this, it's that final hooked it at the last minute. Like, okay, you got my attention.
Exactly. Yep. As long as, if you like the music, that's great. But if you get a free sticker, then there's chances are I'm going to be on your laptop and you're going to see me multiple times a day.
So am I going to get in trouble for mentioning that if I push it to a bunch of UK listeners?
No, not at all. No.
I think it was $1.65 to post it.
Hey, honestly, it's a great way for me to promote, but no, not at all. I've sent them all over the world. I've sent them to every continent so far, except for there's got to be some like Icelandic areas that I haven't sent it to. But all the states in America, I've sent it to the UK, Scotland, all the major areas. So yeah, no, we can get them out there. That'd be great.
Awesome, man. Well, Reeve, thank you for chatting with me. I've really enjoyed speaking to you. It's been very, very cool to connect.
Of course. Yeah. Thanks, Rob, for having me.
Massive thank you to Reeve Stimpson for joining me on today's Straight to Video podcast. I truly hope you'll check out the songs he has online right now. We're all friends here. I think you know the kind of stuff I'm into, and if you like similar music, then you're gonna love these first few singles. The video for Over Me is out now on YouTube, and please make sure to sign up to receive some free stickers sent from Reeve himself. Now, as daft as it sounds, getting that letter from the USA recently was a real throwback to when I first started reaching out to bands and joining mailing lists many, many years ago, and I'm sure you'll feel the same. Just click on the free section over at reevestimpson.com. So that's it for this week's episode of the podcast. So until we chat again, make sure to always be kind, please rewind and unwind, and I'll speak to you all real soon.